Hello, my lovely anatomists and physiologists. We left off looking at what's called the conducting portion of the respiratory tract. And the job of this portion is to move air in and out of the body. And we'll be talking about this moving of air in and out of the body as pulmonary ventilation. So we'll come back to this idea in the future. Now, we said one of the important jobs of the respiratory system is to protect these sensitive surfaces. And so we have what we are going to call a respiratory epithelium, which is lining the majority of our conducting zone. Respiratory epithelium is lining the majority of our conducting zone. It's made out of pseudo-stratified, ciliated, columnar epithelium. And I am going to highlight the ciliated term because that will be an important part of this tissue. We're going to see that this tissue is going to produce a mucus that is going to help trap pathogens, dust particles that are coming in with the air. And then we have the cilia that we see that will actually move that mucus bundle. And what we'll see is the cilia is going to move mucus into your esophagus. The esophagus is the tube that connects the mouth to the stomach. And what we'll see is in some cases, the cilia is moving that mucus down to the esophagus, so we swallow it into the stomach. But in other cases, the cilia is moving the mucus up into the esophagus and then swallowed down into the stomach. Now, why do we want this gross mucus package in our stomach? Well, your stomach is producing hydrochloric acid. This is a great example of a physical barrier from our innate defenses that we studied in our last chapter. That hydrochloric acid is going to be important in breaking down, denaturing any possible pathogens that you might have inhaled. In one version of a textbook that I read, this was called the mucus escalator. I just cannot let go of that name because I loved it so much. As we look at our list of our conducting portion, then we're expecting all of these areas to be lined with this respiratory epithelium, except let us highlight the pharynx. So the pharynx we're going to see is shared with the digestive system or the gastrointestinal system or GI system. And I'm just going to say GI tract here. And so because we are taking air in this area, but also taking food in this area, we're going to see that this will have stratified squamous epithelium because we are experiencing way more abrasion here than we would in the strictly respiratory areas. Okay. One of the other things to pay attention to when we do talk about the respiratory epithelium and the cilia is going to be slowed by cold air. So not only, I personally find it uncomfortable to inhale cold air into my nose, but we'll see here that that's actually also inhibiting the cilia movement, which also explains why we might have a drippy runny nose when we are spending quite a lot of time outdoors. So we're still producing that mucus, but we're just not moving it through the tract the way that we are accustomed to. So when we talk about the nose is the primary entry point for air. The nose is the primary entry point for air, meaning that when we are breathing, the nose is the best choice. Now, of course, if your nose is stuffy because you're sick and you can't get air in there, the mouth becomes an okay secondary entry point. But breathing through the mouth is less than ideal. And a lot of us are spending a lot of time breathing through our mouth, even when our nasal passages are not obstructed. Now, why do we want to breathe through the nose? Why do we want to breathe through the nose? This is where our olfaction is occurring. So if you're strictly breathing in through the mouth, you're missing a huge amount of your sensory information and sensory experience. The nose is going to warm your air. So remember here, we just talked about your cilia slow down when the air is cold. So you're impairing your defensive protective structures if you just suck in a bunch of cold air through your mouth. The nose also humidifies the air. And so this is going to be important in keeping the entire respiratory tract moist as it needs to be. So the nose is going to be important in actually slowing down the air, increasing your olfaction, warming the air, and humidifying the air as we're getting ready to bring it deeper into the body. Something that's interesting is if you are breathing through your mouth more, you will find it harder to breathe through your nose. So this is another example of like, use it or lose it. So the more you breathe through the nose, the easier it is for you to breathe through the nose. The other side of that is you can retrain your body. So if you've been a mouth breather for a while and you find it harder to breathe through the nose, it's probably because you've been doing so much mouth breathing. But if you stop and focus and mindfully inhale through your nose, you'll see that that's going to become easier and easier. When we take a look at our anatomy of our nasal cavity, we're looking here at a model from our lab, and we're seeing here is what we can talk about as the external nose. And I'm not going to go through all of the anatomy here because you're getting that in your lab. And then we have our internal nose, which is our nasal cavity. Let me label it more over here. And notice that you have those three ridges. Oops, let me label those in a new way. That you studied as part of your AMP1 when you studied the skull. The top two are part of the ethmoid bone, and the bottom ridge is its own bone. And we can collectively talk about these as nasal conchae, where the AE ending is the plural form. And this structure here is what's creating that turbulence to slow down the movement of the air as it enters the nasal cavity. So this is giving you time for that for that warming and humidifying of the air. From the nose, let me also go back to the respiratory epithelium, because in addition to producing the mucus, we also get the production here of lysozyme, which we see now is a digestive enzyme. So this is going to help break down bacteria. And we get another chemical called defensins being produced. And so these are antibacterial. So these are being produced by that whole respiratory epithelium. And we also have, I'm going to just say, patrolling phagocytes. Which we also know from our anatomy and from our innate defenses that phagocytes are that first line of cellular defense. And so again, here's another important way that the respiratory epithelium is protecting the tract here. Okay, so last structure I want to label on this particular video is the pharynx. So the pharynx is going to be what we can think of as the back of the throat. So the nasal cavity is opening up into the pharynx. And you have three regions. So where the nasal cavity empties, we talk about this as the nasopharynx. Where the mouth empties into the back of the throat, this is the oropharynx. And so we'll see a transition from the respiratory epithelium in the nasopharynx into that stratified squamous epithelium in the oropharynx. And then behind the larynx here, we have the laryngopharynx. And again, the laryngopharynx is shared by both the respiratory and the digestive tracts. And so we will see oropharynx and laryngopharynx having that stratified squamous epithelium, whereas the rest of this conducting portion would be lined with that respiratory tract. We'll see in those areas where we're going to have some tonsils. So we can actually see a lingual tonsil under the tongue area here by the oropharynx. And then we also have a palatine tonsil that's evident here. So again, this is lymphoid nodules that are there present for defense for any material pathogens and so forth that have been either inhaled or ingested. Let's stop here and pick up with the larynx in our next video. And as always, take care of yourselves and each other.